Harrington Capital is a place that moves fast. The people who matter walk fast, talk faster, and operate on a simple assumption. They already know everything you know, so you better keep up. But that velocity is exactly why leadership was completely blind to a massive, ongoing hemorrhage. $14 million in client funds was quietly draining out of their accounts, and the executives couldn't see it because they were moving too quickly to look down. The problem is rooted in how modern financial data is stored. This diagram illustrates what we call siloed data. Highly paid experts only look at the specific, isolated metrics placed in front of them on any given day. They are locked into these vertical silos, visually and practically preventing them from making lateral connections to last week, last month, or last year. At Harrington, this blind spot took physical form on the third floor. It was an ignored archive room packed with servers and filing systems holding 15 years of dense quarterly reports. Nobody who made decisions had the time to sit in a room full of old paper. It is the great paradox of corporate speed. The faster an organization propels itself forward, the more blind it becomes to the systemic, compounding errors trailing right behind it. Down on the trading floor, everything was motion. Up in the static silence of the data room, there was only Maya Patel. She was the firm's newest intern, which effectively made her invisible. Her role in this high-stakes ecosystem was purely functional. She filed things, she retrieved things. She sat quietly in the back of rooms where decisions were made by people who had long forgotten what it felt like to be the least important person in the building. But Maya possessed one singular advantage over the executives rushing around her. Stripped of high-stakes decisions and immediate crushing deadlines, she had an absolute abundance of uninterrupted time. Zero corporate status translates into the ultimate investigative luxury. Maya had the time to sit down and actually read the raw data, line by line, instead of merely skimming it for a morning briefing. This methodical approach wasn't something Maya picked up at business school. She grew up watching her father work double shifts at a logistics company and her mother run a tailoring business from their living room. In their house, financial survival required counting every single dollar at the end of the month. While Harrington Capital handled billions of dollars with a rapid-fire nonchalance, Maya's parents applied agonizing, slow scrutiny to $20 margins. That environment trains you to pay attention to numbers other people stop looking at. Look at this ledger. By applying that exact scrutiny to 3 years of her mother's handwritten business records, Maya spotted a hidden seasonal demand shift. Pointing it out increased her mother's revenue by 30% in a single year. After 2 rejected applications to Harrington Capital, she rewrote her cover letter from scratch. She stopped writing about a generic passion for finance and instead laid out a highly specific small business case study based on that tailoring shop. The hiring manager called her the next day. True analytical vision comes from treating numbers as literal, unbending truths, a perspective forged in a house where every digit determined whether the bills got paid. Maya started spending her lunch breaks back in that third-floor data room. She took the abandoned quarterly reports and read them the way her father read a contract before signing it, searching for the details where the truth lives. 3 weeks in, Maya flagged a numerical mismatch between a single quarterly entry and its corresponding annual summary. This animated comparison shows how the discrepancy, initially appearing as a minor formatting glitch, first surfaced. 2 weeks later, she identified the exact same mathematical anomaly in a different quarter and across different accounts. The identical nature of these errors across separate time periods proved this was a systematic pattern. She had uncovered a compounding software error. When a tiny misallocation goes undetected by siloed management, it grows exponentially. Over a 36-month timeline, this slight numerical drift compounded to exactly $14 million. Maya spent 6 weeks working entirely alone. She pulled 15 years of historical data, mapped every single anomaly, and built a master spreadsheet that traced the entire life cycle of the error. Catastrophic financial losses rarely announce themselves with a single dramatic crash. They are almost always quiet, systemic software failures that can only be diagnosed by stepping back and viewing the historical data holistically. With the timeline verified, Maya brought her findings to her supervisor, a fast-moving senior analyst named Derek Marsh. She walked him through the discrepancies, the pattern, and the massive final number. Derek barely looked at it. He told her the reports were dense, the numbers were complex, and reminded her that she was an intern. He promised to look when he had time. Thursday passed, then Friday. By the following Monday, Maya checked the shared network drive. Her 6 weeks of meticulous work had been dragged into a digital archive folder labeled Intern Submissions. It was completely unread. Corporate hierarchy functions as a remarkably efficient defense mechanism against uncomfortable truths. When confronted with a problem, organizations routinely prioritize the rank of the messenger over the mathematical validity of the data itself. Maya sat at her desk and faced a choice. She could accept her designated invisible role and let Harrington quietly bleed $14 million, or she could trust her own analysis and risk her nascent career by stepping out of line. She took 3 more days to double-check her work. She tested every formula, verified every data point, and audited every assumption until she was certain the math was bulletproof. Then she executed a bypass. She circumvented Derek entirely, drafting a direct email to the CEO. The subject line left no room for dismissal. Data discrepancy, urgent review required, 14M impact. She attached the file, pressed send, and went back to work. When an organization is completely blinded by its own forward momentum, standard procedures fail. Breaking the chain of command becomes the only viable mechanism to force leadership to halt, look down, and confront a systemic failure. The response arrived in 47 minutes. The CEO requested her presence on the 14th floor that afternoon. In less than an hour, the invisible intern was summoned to the very top of the hierarchy. Walking to the elevator, she texted her mother to say something had happened at work. When her mother asked if it was good or bad, Maya typed back that she didn't know yet. She was carrying a high-stakes corporate victory, built entirely on the slow, blue-collar scrutiny she learned in her living room. In an economy obsessed with chasing macro trends and maximizing operational speed, velocity is everywhere. But the $14 million only became visible to the one person willing to slow down and scrutinize the granular details everyone else had abandoned.
Harrington Capital is a firm built on the promise of absolute control. For 30 years, they cultivated a spotless track record, operating out of a skyscraper fortified by expensive soundproofing, mahogany desks, and an aura of complete invulnerability. To maintain that control, they relied on a rigid defense system. Teams of highly paid experts ran strict quarterly reconciliations, combing through reports to catch any possible mistake before it could see the light of day. Yet, despite that impenetrable wall of oversight, $14 million silently vanished over a 15-year period. Not a single alarm was triggered. Catastrophic corporate blind spots rarely occur because nobody is looking. They happen because the experts are only looking at the wrong scale. This chart shows the firm's variance threshold. Financial systems are programmed to flag sudden, massive numerical spikes, but they are explicitly designed to ignore tiny, incremental fluctuations that stay within these 2 bounds. The firm's standard procedure had a fatal flaw. They only compared each new report to the immediately preceding one. Because they never checked back against the original source data, each new point dropped by an invisibly small fraction compared to the last, never breaking the threshold. A microscopic reporting error in the software acted like a slow leak. Quarter after quarter, it compounded quietly beneath the radar, until 15 years of data revealed a sweeping downward curve, plunging deep into the red. The most dangerous systemic failures do not announce themselves. They compound in the margins, completely unnoticed, until the math simply becomes impossible to survive. Enter Maya Patel. At 22 years old, Maya was an intern. In the rigid hierarchy of Harrington Capital, she was objectively the least important, least powerful person in the building. But while the senior executives were busy reviewing prepackaged quarterly summaries, Maya took a different approach. She decided to bypass the executive reports and dig directly into the raw 15-year-old source data. She invested her invisible hours. Completely unprompted, Maya spent 43 isolated lunch breaks sitting alone in the 3rd-floor server room, meticulously analyzing the numbers over 6 weeks. This graph represents that effort. Maya's quiet, unprompted daily work compounded incrementally.
It followed the exact mathematical curve of the financial loss, but moving in the opposite direction. Uncovering undeniable truths requires stepping outside the prescribed corporate workflow. It means doing the meticulous, unglamorous work that absolutely nobody asked you to do. When she finally presented her analysis, she met immediate friction. Her manager, Derek, dismissed her findings outright, burying them unread in an intern submissions folder for 2 weeks. Maya made a critical decision. Driven by absolute certainty in her math, rather than corporate permission, she bypassed her manager entirely and took the data straight to the CEO. The result was an emergency 9 a.m. meeting. Standing at the front of a polished mahogany boardroom, the 22-year-old intern flawlessly defended her unprompted analysis, answering every question from 14 senior executives and external auditors without checking her notes. The audit confirmed her findings in full. The $14 million was located and restored. Affected clients were notified with full transparency, and the firm's reputation remained entirely intact. When the math is verified, the formal chain of command loses its weight. A junior employee with the right data can override an executive with the wrong assumptions. The immediate corporate reshuffling was swift. The manager who ignored the data was placed on administrative review and resigned. Maya, meanwhile, was called back into the CEO's office. She was offered a full-time position that skipped entry level entirely. They handed her a role in a data integrity division, a department they invented specifically because of her analysis. The most consequential part of Maya's story occurred long before the promotion or the new division. It happened in the quiet of that third-floor data